Alright guys and gals, as you saw in the last video, we have all the, well, most of the parts for Raging Rhino. The other parts we're missing are on their way, but we got enough that we can start putting this motor together. Greg explained everything we're doing. We are indeed going with a 777 stroker motor. Everything's all pretty much ready to be put back together. I got to clean up a little bit of gasket here, and I think that's pretty much it. So the first thing I'm going to do before I start doing anything else is I have our other main crank bearing and our new crank that I'm going to get in the freezer because we don't want it to spoil before we go putting it in. Now, if you don't know, putting these guys in the freezer will actually help install them so much easier because it'll actually kind of shrink the metal down and stuff will slip inside the crankcase a lot easier. So I'm going to go throw these in the freezer. I think our crank is here. It is already wrapped up pretty good. We'll just grab it. Good enough. Throw it in the freezer. And then we'll start cracking on putting this motor back together. Alright guys, I got the crankshaft in the freezer. It's been in the freezer overnight now. I got the, I know you're probably not going to be able to see the two bearings in here for our main drive shaft. Those are in. So now I'm just heating up around where the one crankshaft bearing is going. I did get the other crankshaft bearing in. It's ready to go. And again, I'm using the hot-cold method because I don't have a press or anything set up. I'm warming up here around the hole where the bearing is. And the idea is the cold will actually shrink the metal of the crank. The heat will expand the metal of the crankcase, opening up the hole a little bit and make it a lot easier to go in. So I'm going to get some heat to this. When the time comes, I'll hurry up, run in, grab the crank, put it in the vise, and hopefully slip this down on top without too much difficulty. A few motors that I've actually removed the crank on. This hot, cold, wet method has worked about half the time, so I'm going off about a 50-50% ratio for success. So this may work. We may end up having to just go ahead and either find or rent a crank puller that works or see if I can't rig up a nut that'll work with the one I have. Woo, that's cold and frosty. Alright, let's throw a little assembly lube in there. And see what we can do. Just gonna have to go this way. There's some light tappage. And look at that, guys. She slipped right on. Hot cold method. Worked like a charm. So my percentage rate just went up. Woo! Alright, now, can I remember how all this goes in here? Guys, we got everything here back together for the most part, except for the reverse gear, which I wanted to go over because these 09s, if you guys have heard, they've had reverse gear problems. And what the problem is this stock gear that came in the 09s has a bushing. It's not a bearing in the middle here, it's a bushing. Now this one had yet to have catastrophic failure, but as you can see here, hopefully, you see all this play? there's a lot of play in there, which means that bushing was starting to go bad. So what that means is eventually it was going to push the snap ring off, which would allow this gear to slide so you would not have reverse gear. So while we're in here, we're going to do the upgrade kit. And what the upgrade kit does is instead of having that bushing, it actually gives you a little roller bearing for inside that gear. So that goes on a new shaft. And instead of snap rings, then what they also give you is a little spacer bushing with a washer. And then with that on there and the other half of the case pressing on this when it's in there, there is absolutely zero chance of this guy failing and coming off. So let's go ahead, use a little assembly lube here because I love assembly lube. And it's just fun to say lube. So we'll put that on there. Let's get a little more here. We're going to do up our roller bearing good so we don't have any problems with it down the road. And the outside, we'll slip that down over the shaft. Lube her up good. Install that in there to mesh with our gear, as well as, pull this out a little bit I guess, our bearing in there. And then move that up. Our bushing, our washer. Now we should be good to go. This guy can go in the parts bin for maybe something else. But as far as reverse for Raging Rhino, we're no longer using this piece of trash. Alright, and I do believe the last thing we have to do in this half of the crank is simply put our input shaft in place. So, do our usual lubing up, assembly lube. And mesh it together with all the other gears. Voila! There is that half of the case. Now we'd go ahead and mate these two together. However, Greg wants to go ahead and use the actual Yamaha bond for our gasket sealer here. And I'm not going to argue with him. It's his machine. So he has yet to get that to me. So that's one of the things we're waiting on. So how about we just go ahead and snap to whenever it is. He has it. And we're ready to mate these two halves of the crank together. Alright guys, there you can see we got the engine back together, at least as a whole, with the two crank shafts. And we've got the stator side mostly back together. We've got our oil pump gear hooked up with our timing chain that goes on the counterbalance gear. Of course, that is what drives the oil pump. And that's all back together. Our timing chain's in, our one timing chain guide. As you can see, I've already spun this several times. I can't do it with one hand, but our clearance is all good. Yamaha makes this real easy because you see there's two alignment marks here that line up. And this alignment mark actually lines up with the mark on this shaft. And then, of course, these gears has that keyway in there. So you really cannot, as long as you make sure these two lines are mated together, and then this gear's lined up with the mark on this shaft, there is no way to screw this up. Everything will be aligned. So your timing is good and you're not having things collide in there that shouldn't collide.
Yep, as you guys may have guessed by now, my microphone on my GoPro had messed up once again. I can't for the life of me remember what all I'm telling you right here, so we'll go ahead and end this video right here for today. So I'll simply say thanks for watching, and until next time, keep on riding.